Ethan, after 20 years, we're forced to eliminate your position, said Trevor Langston, CEO of Halcyon Systems, Inc., his tone indifferent. Please clear out your desk by 5 p.m. My name is Ethan Carter, 48 years old. Until that Friday. Afternoon, I was the lead systems analyst at Halcyon Systems in Charlotte, North Carolina. For the past 2 decades, I had carried the entire IT infrastructure on my back, from the days when servers were kept in the basement to the company's full migration to cloud platforms. 3 CEOs had come and gone. I stayed. I trained every new hire, resolved every data crisis, worked weekends and holidays without ever asking for recognition or a raise. I believed in the value of loyalty, and that silent dedication had its own worth. So when Trevor called me into his office and Karen Mitchell from HR was already waiting there, I knew what was coming. There was no need to guess. I simply nodded. I understand. And quietly stood up. No pleading, no anger, just a calm acceptance. Back at my desk, I began packing my things. A family photo, the coffee mug my daughter gave me for Father's Day back in 6th grade, a small cactus that had survived 20 years under fluorescent lights. The younger colleagues, most of whom I had personally trained, glanced at me silently, then quickly turned away as if I'd become a ghost. Bethany from marketing came over, her voice choking. Ethan, I just heard. This is ridiculous. You basically built this whole system. I simply shrugged. The company is changing direction, Bethany. It happens. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I gestured gently. No need to make a scene. Sometimes silence is the strongest way to affirm one's worth. Trevor stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching me leave. No handshake, no farewell, just eyes full of suspicion, as if I might destroy the system in a fit of rage. He never understood the kind of person I am. And maybe he never cared. Halcyon had changed. When I first started here, the company had just 2 small office floors in an industrial park. I personally installed the first servers. Back then, my daughter, Sophie, was still in kindergarten. Now she's in her final year of graduate school at Stanford. Time passed quickly, and I always stayed behind the scenes, keeping things running smoothly while no one noticed. People called me Halcyon's silent gatekeeper. I knew every line of legacy code, every hidden path, every vulnerability that no one else could see. In 20 years, I had never caused trouble, never made demands. But that also meant they weren't afraid of me. They thought they could discard me easily, like tossing out an outdated piece of equipment. Trevor became CEO 5 years ago. A young MBA type, always talking about digital transformation and streamlining systems. He didn't care how the system actually ran, as long as it looked modern. Then 3 months ago, Jason Whitaker arrived, a restructuring consultant with shiny credentials from Stanford, expensive suits, and a perfectly timed smile. Ever since Jason showed up, I began getting excluded from meetings. Projects I used to lead were reassigned to other teams. Management emails suddenly forgot to CC me. There was no official memo, but I understood. I was being phased out. Didn't react. I observed, and I took notes. One day, during a routine system scan, something no one else bothered to do anymore, I discovered a string of suspicious financial transactions linked to a strange name, Apex Solutions Group. Shady company with a registration address listed at a UPS store and increasing monthly wire transfers. The amounts weren't large enough to trigger alarms, but I knew something wasn't right. I quietly archived the data, created secure backups, and stored them in places no one would ever expect. That afternoon, as I sat in my car, staring at the building where I had spent more than half my life, I didn't feel angry. Just a cold emptiness, and the beginning of something else. Trevor and Jason thought they had removed me quietly. They didn't know that I was the only one who knew how to restore everything, and how to erase every trace, and they certainly didn't know that next Thursday was the board meeting. The next morning, I sat in my small home office with a hot cup of coffee and the strange quiet of a morning without work. Laura, my wife, placed a hand on my shoulder and refilled my cup. "The way they treated you, it's just not fair," she said, unable to hide the anger in her eyes. I nodded slightly, but didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. After Laura left to do some shopping, I opened a desk drawer and took out a small black USB drive, one of 3 I'd kept hidden for years. Inside was more than just source code, system logs, and technical documentation. It contained something Halcyon had never thought of: complete copies of transactions, internal emails, and system access logs from the past 18 months. Years ago, when Halcyon underwent an internal investigation over a data breach, I had been tasked with building a comprehensive tracking and audit system. I did it meticulously, by the book, and also kept an offline copy, signed off by legal, then forgotten. Now that copy was more valuable than ever. I started combing through the data. Within hours, I confirmed. Apex Solutions Group was a shell company. The total amount transferred from Halcyon to that company exceeded $6.2 million over just 18 months. The payments were all categorized under third-party software fees, a line item few people paid attention to, especially when invoices looked legitimate. I found the approver, Douglas Fraser, the company's CFO. A name I had once trusted. What chilled me even more was when I looked into Apex's business registration. The legal name was Graham Cole, Douglas's brother. I sat up straight. In that moment, all the scattered pieces suddenly clicked into place. Douglas had been authorizing payments to a family-owned company, posing as a software vendor. The invoices were padded by 15 to 20%, and the difference flowed into their personal pockets. A perfectly designed embezzlement, because the system actually did receive a service. I didn't rush. Instead, I organized the evidence, created spreadsheets, aligned timelines, cross-referenced IP addresses, approval signatures, and emails that seemed harmless, but revealed a lot when connected. I called it the shadow file, something the internal audit team would never uncover without a key. Afternoon, I opened a new email. The sender's address wasn't part of Halcyon's system, but it mimicked an internal account. I had created it years ago for security testing. No one else knew about it. In the to field, I typed Trevor Langston. Subject: financial. Misconduct detected. Immediate review required. I attached a brief summary of the payments to Apex. I didn't mention the family connection, nor any damning evidence. Just enough to make him panic. After sending it, I set my phone down, stood up, and left the house. Not to run away, just to see how they would respond. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Trevor. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then Karen Mitchell from HR called. Her message carried a much different tone, cold and vaguely threatening. "Mr. Carter, we've received your email containing internal information. Please cease all contact with Halcyon staff. Otherwise, the company will pursue legal action." Smiled faintly. They thought I was trying to blackmail them. That afternoon, I drove to the bank and opened a personal safe deposit box I hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. Inside was an old hard drive containing system data from the early phase of the fraud. It also had records showing that Douglas Fraser had requested expanded access to the accounting system, precisely when Apex began receiving payments. When I returned home, my phone showed 7 missed calls, from Trevor, Karen, and now Chase. Whitaker, the newly hired consultant. His name on the list surprised me. He had no reason to contact me, unless he was involved. I checked my personal email. There was an urgent message from Miles Rayner, a young employee I had mentored. "Jake, people are freaking out over the email you sent. Jason just called an emergency meeting. They've revoked all your access, even archive backups." "What's going on?" I replied briefly. "Don't get involved, Miles. Just observe." Everything was unfolding exactly as I'd expected. They were panicking, trying to contain the damage. But what they didn't know was that I'd been planning this step by step ever since they pushed me out the door. That evening, when Laura asked, "What are you going to do next?" I simply said, "Thursday is the board meeting." I looked up, out the window. The city lights were beginning to glow. The early summer air was cool and calm. I knew I had entered a new chapter, no longer the man who kept the system running, but the one who would expose those who were tearing it apart. On Wednesday morning, one day before the board meeting, I sat in my car, parked a block away from Halcyon Systems headquarters. My laptop lay on the passenger seat, logged into an email account I'd set up years ago during internal system testing. It looked like a Halcyon account, but was actually hosted outside the main infrastructure, impossible to trace unless someone knew exactly what to look for. I sent an email to every member of the board's audit committee with a simple subject line. Before approving Q2 bonuses, read this. Attached was a summary of the investigation. Irregular payments, inflated invoices, the family connection between Douglas Fraser and Graham Cole, along with a flowchart showing how the money had been leaking over time. I didn't sign the email. No need. They'd know who was capable of stitching that kind of data together, and more importantly, they wouldn't be able to ignore it. After sending it, I drove to a small cafe in the suburbs, ordered an espresso, sat and waited. At exactly 9:07 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A minute later, a text message arrived. Mr. Carter, we request your immediate presence to discuss what you've sent to the board. Patricia Connors, Halcyon Legal Counsel. Same old tactic. Pull me in, control me, strip me of initiative. But I was no longer the quietly dismissed employee walking out with his head down. I opened my personal email. Another message from Miles Rayner. The police just arrived. Douglas and Trevor have been pulled into separate conference rooms. Jason looks pale. What's going on? I smiled. Finally, the wheel had started to turn. Later that morning, I received another call, this time from Douglas Fraser. I let it ring a while before picking up. Ethan, listen to me. This might be a misunderstanding. Paying a family-owned company with corporate funds for a year and a half is a misunderstanding? I asked, my voice steady and cold. He hesitated, then continued. We can settle this quietly. No need to blow it up. What do you want? A severance package? A new position? I can make that happen. Douglas, you don't understand. I don't want anything from you. I just want the board to know who's destroying their company. I hung up before he could respond. Immediately, another email appeared. From Karen Mitchell. Attached is the revised severance package, now doubled from the original offer. Please note, disclosing internal company information is a violation of the law and your confidentiality agreement. The same tired threats. And this time, they no longer worked. That afternoon, I arranged to meet with Frank Delgado, a longtime board member, someone I'd worked with on a cybersecurity project 7 years ago. We met at a park near Lake Wiley. I brought a thick envelope containing detailed printouts of everything I'd gathered, transactions, the shell company structure, copies of emails between Trevor and Douglas, and instances where Jason Whitaker had been brought in as a consultant without going through formal review channels. Frank opened the documents right there on the bench. He didn't say a word for 10 minutes, just flipped through the pages. When he finally looked up, his gaze was heavy. You've got all the evidence. And I'm guessing this isn't even everything. I nodded. I've stored multiple copies, in secure locations. If anything happens to me, or anyone in my family is threatened, someone will send the files to the SEC, the press, and the IRS. Frank offered a smile that wasn't quite a smile. I always thought you were the quietest one in those tech briefings. Turns out you were the only one who saw everything. He stood, envelope in hand. Tomorrow morning, the finance committee will convene. You don't need to attend, but brace yourself. A storm's coming. When I returned home, Laura was waiting at the door. Some guy named Jason stopped by. Said he needed to speak with you urgently. You weren't home, so I told him. You were out. He came here? I asked, stunned. Laura just shrugged. I wasn't scared. Actually, I felt proud. That night, I sat down with my laptop and used an old admin account that hadn't been deactivated to schedule one final email. At exactly 8 a.m. Thursday morning, every board member would receive the full report. No more summaries, no more anonymity. Only the truth. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. Outside the window, summer sunlight bathed Charlotte in golden brilliance. I knew that tomorrow morning would mark the beginning of something much bigger, not just reclaiming justice for myself, but purging a system that had been rotting from the inside. Thursday morning, clear skies, early sun. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand, watching neighbors quietly start their day. No alarm clock, no need to go to the office, no more sitting in meetings being ignored like a ghost. 2 a.m. The email I had scheduled the night before was automatically sent to every board member of Halcyon Systems, a full, detailed report with irrefutable evidence. Subject line: before approving any bonuses, please read carefully. Inside were inflated payment statements, Apex Solutions, group's business registration showing Graham Cole as the owner, a flowchart of the money trail from Halcyon to the shell, company, internal email threads between Douglas Fraser and Trevor Langston discussing soft budget allocations, system logs showing Jason Whitaker receiving special access outside standard approval protocols. I didn't state my purpose. I didn't call for action. I simply placed the truth on the table and let it speak for itself. 17 a.m. The phone started ringing. Unknown numbers, landlines, mobile phones, likely board assistants or legal advisors. I didn't pick up. They were no longer in control. a.m. An emergency meeting of the Finance Committee began at Halcyon headquarters. Frank Delgado would be there, with the hard copy I'd handed him yesterday. The email, no doubt, had been printed into stacks, placed in front of each member. I didn't know exactly what was unfolding behind the closed doors on the 15th floor, but I knew what their reaction would be. When someone exposes a $6.2 million hole, people don't just nod and move on. 32 a.m. My phone buzzed. A message from Miles Rayner. You won't believe this. The police just showed up. Douglas and Trevor have been separated into different conference rooms. Jason looks like he's about to vomit. Everyone's in chaos. What did you do? I didn't reply. No need. Miles shouldn't get pulled in any deeper. He still had a future ahead. Kings a.m. One of the few calls I answered that day. Patricia. Connors, Halcyon's senior legal counsel. Mr. Carter, this is Patricia Connors. I'm representing the board. We need you to come to headquarters immediately to discuss the materials you submitted. I'm afraid I can't, I said calmly. Everything I know is in the report. All copies have been stored in multiple, secure locations. If anything happens to me or my family, the files will be forwarded to the SEC, IRS, and 3 major news agencies. A heavy silence followed. Then she spoke carefully. The board is taking this very seriously. Several senior executives have been suspended pending investigation. We sincerely hope for your continued cooperation. I have cooperated, and I will continue to do so if it serves transparency. But I'm not coming back as someone under their authority. If I return, it has to be with real power. The time for cover-ups is over. After hanging up, I drove out of the city to a small diner in the suburbs, somewhere no one would think to look. I needed peace. By noon, the news began to leak on business news sites. Halcyon Systems, major financial misconduct investigation. Multiple executives suspended. No names were mentioned yet, but that was only a matter of time. At p.m., Frank Delgado called. He didn't mince words. Ethan, it's a bloodbath. Douglas confessed as soon as he was confronted with the documents. He's trying to cut a deal by throwing all the blame on Trevor. Trevor's denying everything, but the evidence is airtight. Jason is stammering that he was just an outside consultant and knew nothing. The board isn't buying it. I listened, without speaking. Frank continued. Preliminary estimate, $6.2 million funneled out through shell companies. Could be more. Legal and external audit teams are stepping in next Monday. But that's not why I'm calling. He paused, then lowered his voice. The board voted unanimously. They want you back. Not in your old role. They're creating a new position, Chief Information Security Officer, reporting directly to the board. Full authority over all. Security oversight and system auditing. I was silent. I had prepared for this possibility. But hearing it become real was something else entirely. I'll think about it, I said. That evening I told Laura everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked softly, "Do you want to go back?" I looked out the window. Summer light streamed through the trees. I wasn't angry anymore. What remained was a quiet satisfaction. That I had proven I was never expendable. What do you think? I asked. She smiled. I think Halcyon needs someone like you, but they no longer deserve you, unless you set the terms. I nodded. This time I wouldn't return as before. This time I'd write the rules. Monday morning, I walked into the main lobby of Halcyon Systems Inc., wearing a grey suit I had only ever worn at my younger brother's wedding. The security guard at the reception desk, who used to ignore me like an old piece of furniture, looked up, paused for a beat, then gave a respectful nod. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter." The guest badge was printed in seconds, but this time I wasn't coming in as a former employee. I had been invited to the top floor, the executive level, a place I had never had a reason to visit in my 20 years at the company. The elevator doors opened to a quiet hallway. The large boardroom was at the end of the corridor. When I stepped, inside, 10 board members were already seated. Frank Delgado gave me a small nod. The meeting chair, interim CEO Elise Warren, formerly Chief Operating Officer, looked tense but resolute. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Carter," she began. "What you've helped uncover is unprecedented in this company's history. Your cooperation was crucial in allowing us to act swiftly." I nodded, listening silently. Upon review, the total embezzled funds amount to $6.2 million, funneled through 3 shell companies linked to Douglas Fraser's family. Both Trevor Langston and Jason Whitaker were complicit, though to varying degrees. Douglas has confessed. Trevor denies involvement, but the evidence is overwhelming. As for Jason, he left the country early Saturday and is currently under federal warrant. "As for you," she continued, "the board voted unanimously to establish a new role, Chief Information Security Officer, reporting directly to the board. We formally offer you this position." I placed a folder on the table. Elise opened it, skimmed through, and frowned. Inside were the terms I had prepared, not as a job applicant, but as someone rebuilding a broken system from the ground up, full authority to audit the IT infrastructure, including subsystems previously off limits, and a independent budget. Not subject to cuts by the CFO or CEO, veto power over any tech-related contract showing signs of irregularity, freedom to build my own technical team, no HR or middle management approval required. Elise looked at me and spoke slowly. "These terms are highly unusual." I said only one sentence. "And stealing $6.2 million wasn't?" The room fell silent. That fraud happened because no one was watching what truly needed watching. If you want to fix it, you have to be willing to change it at the root. I'm not coming back to continue as before. I'm coming back to make sure this never happens again. I stood. "You have until noon today to decide. I have 2 other job offers waiting." I walked out of the boardroom, leaving them in quiet disarray. At 11:47 a.m., I got a call from Frank Delgado. "All your terms have been approved. No objections." I simply replied, "I'll return, starting next week." 6 months later, I sat in the corner office on the 16th floor, looking out over the Charlotte skyline under the bright summer sun. The building that once cast me out without hesitation was now the one I protected, not for revenge, but to restore integrity. Douglas Fraser was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Trevor Langston was awaiting trial. Jason Whitaker was extradited back to the U.S. after being arrested in Rio de Janeiro. Most of the stolen funds had been recovered thanks to the board's prompt action. I no longer ran the IT department directly. That role I'd handed to Miles Rayner, the young man I once mentored. He didn't need me to teach him technology, only to believe he was ready, and I believed he was. One July afternoon, Laura stood at my office door and smiled. "Ready? For lunch, boss?" I grabbed my jacket and walked out with her. As we passed through the tech floor, everyone looked up and greeted me, not out of fear, but respect. They knew what had happened. They knew I could have burned the entire place to the ground, but instead I saved it, quietly, just as I always had. In the elevator, Laura took my hand. "Are you happy?" I thought for a moment, then nodded softly. Not exactly happy, but complete, like rebuilding a collapsed bridge using better materials than before. And this time, that bridge belonged to me.